You know, when I stepped down from the bench about a year ago and contemplated entering this race with zero political experience or political ties, I did so because of a fundamental conviction that unless we start electing people who are more interested in serving us all than in careers in Washington, the America we leave for Samuel's children and all of your children and grandchildren will be a far different one than the one we've experienced. And I left the bench convinced that this election is not about left or right, and it's not about Democrat or Republican. It's about values, our values. It's about who we are as Americans and what kind of a nation we want to leave to those who follow us. You know, the statistics show over the last decade that about 85% of the American public believes Congress is dysfunctional. I agree. Congress is a mess. The leaders of both parties don't understand us, and they're not doing the work we elected them to. And if we keep sending people to Washington who take all the special PAC money, special interest money that they can, and become bought and paid for by those who support them, we're going to continue to get the same kind of Congresses that we know today. One who owes their fealty to the powers in D.C. and not to the American people. And you know, that's why when I entered this race, I made one fundamental decision. I won't take a dime of special interest money. Because you know, you can't fight the special interests if you take their money. And beyond that, the fight to beat back the special interests is crucial if we're going to achieve fundamental change on the biggest issues that face America, like affordable health care for every American citizen. The reality is that getting there involves standing up to big pharmaceutical companies, big insurance companies, and other special interests who keep our costs twice that of all the other developed nations, so that every man, woman, and child in South Dakota and across the country pays $5,000 more than the average of the rest of the developed nations just for health care every year. It's like a tax, if you will, on health care that is $20,000 for a family of 4 every year. The cost of health care, rather than corporate tax structures before the tax law was passed, is the real thing that is dragging down our American economic competitiveness internationally. It's the tapeworm, if you will, that eats away at our competitiveness. Think about this. We have a 19% gross domestic product being consumed by healthcare alone. The rest of the world spends about 9% of their gross domestic product on healthcare. So the manufacturer in Alcester, South Dakota, like my brother Joe's involved with, has to drag all that cost of healthcare for their employees into every pressure washer that they make and try to sell in Germany, Japan, and France. And it also leaves out a lot of middle-class Americans, not just the poor. I go all across the state. We've been to over 110 communities and counting, in coffee shops, in convenience stores, talking to Democrats, Republicans, retired people, business people, up and down main streets, into every courthouse, and we hear the same thing. Healthcare costs are overwhelming our families. Small business owners plead for help, not just to provide health care that's affordable for their employees, but for themselves. My wife and I just learned that we're going to face 42% increase in our health care costs as of July 1, so that we'll pay $21,300 for the two of us. And you know what? I get topped routinely wherever I go and tell that story. People are paying more. Business owners telling me, you know what? We don't even have health care anymore, health coverage. We're going it without and hoping that we don't face a financial calamity. The system is broken, and we need people who are going to go and treat it less like a political football than like an urgent American need. But there's far more. I'll tell you something, our Republican majority in Congress has made it clear that they're coming after Social Security and Medicare. Count on it. And you know why they're coming after those two and Medicaid? Because they suddenly realized we're facing massive deficits in this country. We're spending $4 for every $3 we take in. And it's largely because of the massive tax cut that gave 83% of the benefits to the wealthiest 1% of us, the exact group who didn't need it. I stand for common sense, fiscally responsible tax reform that is revenue neutral, that faces a broad consensus like the '86 Reagan tax cuts did, that closes loopholes for the wealthy and corporations who take advantage of them, and lowers tax rates for everyone, especially the middle class, because it's the middle class who's been taking the brunt of the economic factors over the last 35 years. When I was a 12-year-old boy, I took my first job at Foland's IGA, and I made 50 cents an hour, and I was probably overpaid. But that man who's still living was a mentor to me. Now that wasn't the minimum wage. The minimum wage was $1.60. But think about this. For the minimum wage to have kept pace over these last 50 years, it would need to equal about $11.40 an hour. So in the current debate about food stamps, ask yourself, when people who are working a full-time job at $10 an hour and have a dependent child qualify for food stamps, who's getting the benefit? The person who's doing his or her duty by working a full-time job, or the employer who underpays so much that that person needs to rely not just on government aid and food stamps, but on housing and a whole host of other ways as well. I stand for the working person in this country, those who aspire to work and those who have done the work, so that we take care of our families in this country and those who are at the heart and soul of America. It's middle class. We have a population in Congress who is dedicated to serving not the middle class, not working families and small businesses, but the ultra-wealthy class. And you know, they're not the people I represented as a small-town lawyer either. I'm dedicated to serving the people that I represented as a small-town lawyer, farmers and ranchers. I'm an unwavering supporter of country of origin labeling because people have the fundamental right to know where it is that the meat they raised, that they're eating was raised. That's a fundamental issue of speaking truth. And I will stand opposed to vertical integration of the livestock industry, and I'll work for fundamental amendments to the Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921. So there's absolutely no confusion that meat packers can't also be large livestock owners and control the market. Farmers and ranchers need an advocate again in this state. So I will be a voice for ethanol, and don't kid yourself. The party that my leading opponent, Dusty Johnson, represents, has an administrator who's doing everything he can to help big oil because that's whose pocket he's in. He's not going to stand up for the family farm, and ethanol is a key part of that prosperity that we've experienced over the last 25 years. Now, I'll also stand for a fundamental concept that's constitutional in its roots, and that is Congress's right, Congress's authority under Article 1, Section 8, to regulate international trade. And when we have a president who enacts tariffs in such a willy-nilly fashion that his economic advisor quits over it, and then shoves American farmers into the front lines of a trade war, it's time to stand up and speak truth that we need to restore the constitutional authority in Congress. So my friends, our friends on the other side, our congressional delegation, can do more than just wring their hands. They can stand up for their constituents and say, yes, I will vote to restore the power in Congress to regulate trade so that it's done once again in a measured, purposeful, deliberate, thoughtful way, and not through erratic actions of one person. You know, I dream of an America where every person has an opportunity to sit at the table of prosperity once again. Because America works best when it works for everyone. At the very heart of who we are as Americans is that fundamental idea that's quintessentially ours and that our nation was founded upon. That every one of us is created equal and endowed by the Creator with rights that government cannot deprive us of. In fact, for which governments were established to protect us. Life, liberty, in the pursuit of happiness, that American idea that every child has the right to reach as far as she can in life based on her own hard work and God-given ability, without regard to who her parents are or how much money they own. And part of that means that every child has the right to start school at approximately the same educational level as all the other kids. So I'm an undying proponent of getting preschool for children whose parents don't have the money to afford it themselves. And you know, my experiences on the bench taught me that I need to be using this megaphone I've been given to fight for a bright future for every American child and to help to get young, nonviolent felons what they need to move forward in life. An education, a job skill, and hope for the future. Because crime's biggest enemies, as I saw in 15 years on the bench and before that on the parole board, crime's biggest enemies are a stable home, and education, and a decent job. And I have dedicated this time that I have a megaphone for to fight for fundamental criminal justice reform that treats drug addiction more as the national epidemic that it is that's ravaging our communities and tearing apart families than a ticket to prison. We have an opportunity to continue down a path where we've spent some $7 trillion on wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, spilled the blood of thousands of our sons and daughters, dotted their hillsides with bombs. Or we can invest again in the lives of our neighbors, in their education, in affordable health care, in decent homes, and in jobs that pay a living wage. Because when we invest in our neighbors, that allows them to be the kind of stable parents they need to be for their children, and that their children need to have them be, to show them the way in life, and to show them how to live as responsible adults. And when we do that and help them to get educated and to enter the workforce, we supply employers with the workers they need that they so hunger for all across the state. And we build value into their lives, and their wealth will then rise up and support all those upon whom their labors rest. You know, as the father of some war veterans, I understand the importance of a vote to send our sons and daughters off to war. In the moral wrong of offering their blood, but then at the same time passing on the costs of that war to their generation because we don't have the guts to tell the people how much it costs. My life and Dusty Johnson's, the Republican nominees, give our public a clear choice. We come from very different backgrounds. I've lived my life and spent my career in nonpartisan service entirely apart from the political field. Dusty is a longtime fixture of the peer political establishment who now seeks to go to Washington. I come to reform the system from the outside. Everything Dusty has shown is that he is not interested in any kind of fundamental reform and that he wants to continue the status quo there. I'll stand to end a congressional dues system that charges our congressmen and women money to serve on the committees of their choice. What an offensive thing to do. That's our committee work that they're doing. Who gave congressional leaders the right to collect dues from them to do that work that we the people sent them for? And when I go to Washington, like every new congressman, there will be the special interests who line up at the orientation session. You can read about this online. And they come with their fat checks that they wave in front of the newly elected congressman, because it's much more efficient to give these kind of gifts after the person's actually elected, right? That's smart business. What will Dusty do when they come to him if he's our next congressman? He's made it clear that he's taking PAC money now. Anyone who takes the special interest money today as a candidate will take it upon election. When they wave their check in front of me, let me tell you something. I don't need a career in Washington. And it'll be my high honor to tell them exactly what they can do with their money. And I am offended and will continue to speak out at the telemarketing that our congressional delegation and others are now doing all across the country. When they get to Washington, they meet 138 days a year on average. All right, not the busiest schedule. They meet from Tuesday morning to Thursday afternoon when they're in session. They will cast a vote. There may be 3 votes at 9 a.m. and at 60 Minutes, and many congressmen and women themselves have described, they make a beeline down opposite sides of the road to their congressional headquarters to start their telemarketing duties, in which they dial for dollars. And they will call until their congressional beepers sound, telling them time to get back. And then they will get their votes in again and turn around and do the same thing, and they do it for the entire time they're in Washington. Maybe that's one reason why Congress has failed to pass the 12 appropriations bills that make up the budget more than a couple times in the last 20 years. People all across this state that I talk to hunger for someone who will be a strong, independent voice that South Dakota needs in Washington. Like me, they're sick of a government that works for special interests and national party leaders, and they're tired of the career politicians who bow to them. It's time we elect someone who will work for us again, who cares more about the next generation than about the next election. You and I have an incredible opportunity here. Most people who are politicos in this state don't think I have a chance to win this election. Not a chance. You have a chance to voice your opinion at the polls. And think about it. If we happen to prevail on November 6th, we will send a message all across the nation. It'll be one of the big upsets in the country. The national news will then pay attention. And they will start to look back and say, how did this guy, who had never even been involved in politics and comes from the minority party, win this race? What on earth happened? And they will start to dig in a little further and say, aha, he did not bow to the special interests. He stood up for the people. He refused PAC money. That's how we start to loosen the grip of the special interests. We can show all America that the people, we the people, when we unite, when we put aside all these petty differences that divide us, and remember that what unites us is so much greater. We the people are stronger than all the special interests, all the big party bosses in Washington put together. Then we will start to show that we control our government again, because don't be deceived. This election is a test. Who owns America? Who owns America? Is it the special interests and the ultra-wealthy? Or is it we the people? I stand alone in a lot of ways against all the power of pure politics. The governor has come out very early on and put all his weight behind Dusty Johnson. And his massive war chest will no doubt be available as needed. And Dusty has already been to the swamp and talked with people in the special interests. He's acknowledged that. He has connections that reach all the way into Washington, and we saw swamp politics come to South Dakota in the primary, with dark ads being spent against Chantel Krebs in the amount, according to Open Secrets, of some, I think it was $310,000. We're on notice that those dark ads will show up again. This is exactly the reason I am running for Congress, to stand up against all the special interests, all the powers, all the career politicians, and to be the voice of the people. And it feels very alone. I feel very alone a lot of days. But then I remember, I'm not alone. I have you. All across the state, people like you, Republicans, Democrats, independents, others, who just want to see good government again. Maybe that's why, even though we didn't take a penny of PAC money, and I had no mailing lists when I started this race, maybe that's why we outraised all the Republicans the last 2 reporting periods, with some of my own money thrown in to help us. And maybe that's why someone who started this race with no friends, you guys on Facebook know what I mean. I was a judge. You're not supposed to be socializing on Facebook. I just used it for my grandchildren's pictures and family. So we started out at 0. Dusty had a huge Facebook following when he started this race, 2,600 people following it. And it's just grown to, I think, 4,100. But we've grown too. We just passed 10,000 followers this week. So I don't stand alone. I stand with people all across the state, all across the party lines. And my question for you is, will you help? Will you stand with us? Because that is what this election is about, is us all together working for something bigger than ourselves. Thank you so much for being here. God bless.